So, for this lecture, we're going to focus on design principles, contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. What you'll learn will affect where you put things, say, on your website or on your mobile app, the colors you choose, and how consistent your design elements will be. So, a couple of objectives from this lecture will be to be able to identify the four principles of visual design, which represent the acronym CRAP, and then also to be able to evaluate websites for adherence to these principles. And what you gather from this lecture will allow you to be able to apply like visual design principles to improve various different outdated layouts. So there are four visual design principles that you can apply to the design of just about anything. That's contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Now, whether you're designing a web page or a button or a logo or a brochure or maybe an application interface, these design principles will help you to create the look and feel aesthetics of your project and will determine whether your message is effectively communicated. Now, contrast is all about using opposites to capture your audience's attention and draw the eye to key parts of your message. Contrast adds drama. It organizes the design and helps establish a visual hierarchy. Contrast is based on a variety of different design elements, color, shapes, sizes, orientation, position, texture, and a lot more. Now, today we're going to talk about the three most prevalent types of contrast. So, the most common way to incorporate contrast is by using color. Complementary cover colors, across from each other on the color wheel, such as maybe blue and orange or yellow and purple. These have high contrast. While, harmonious colors, the ones that are like beside each other on the color wheel, such as like red and orange, they have low contrast. So establishing the right balance when using contrasting colors is going to be key to creating an attractive and effective design. Now, if the contrast is too stark, you risk overwhelming or maybe irritating your reader's eye and compromising your message. But if the contrast is too weak, your design may appear monotone and kind of uninteresting and not catch their eye at all. So if your design relies on harmonious colors, what you want to do is create contrast using tints. That means adding a little bit more white to the color and adding shades, which means adding a little bit more black to the color. Now remember, you must ensure that participating colors in a design don't strain your user's eyes. Now here on the left is an example of bad contrast using complementary colors. And on the right is an example of good contrast using different shades of the same colors that we used in the left example. Now, a quick way to know if your design has optimal contrast is by looking at it in its grayscale version. Now, this can easily be done by using like, any kind of popular imaging editing tool. Now, in this example, we see how just, contrasting a white color foreground, on the darker background has kind of made the design look, a little bit more effective. And in this example, the impact of creating contrast in design via color is evident because it gives a break in the dark color design, improving readability of the design, and your eyes instantly go to the white color text, which is improving sales. Now, Chewy's add to cart is a good example of how to choose a color that contrasts well with the surroundings while still kind of looking good among, the site's branded elements. It stands out for us. And really, that's like your actionable element. So you want it to stand out. Now, I'll provide an active link to this, but this is the Adobe color wheel that will kind of help you just kind of pick out different color schemes that will either, complement each other, or be a little bit maybe monochromatic if that's what you want, so that you can see different shades. It's a really good tool to use when you're working with color. Now, another way to maintain contrast between like discrete elements, especially text, is to use different sizes. To draw users' attention, say, toward a certain element, we keep its size maybe significantly larger than the surrounding elements. Like in this example here, changing the font size and the style of our heading tags gives them sort of a better contrast against the paragraph text as well as in between themselves. Another example is the size of a heading and a paragraph on a website. So the heading with more importance, has bigger font size than say the paragraph. So it stands out, say, from the rest of the text. The size contrast also applies to other elements. For example, the size of the banner image, with respect to, say, the other elements on the website. Now, next in line for showing contrast in design are shapes and form. Contrast in shape can be as basic as adding rounded corners, to your quadrilateral elements, or as extreme, say, as using like circular elements together with like square ones. Now, the different shapes on a website kind of help us differentiate between the different elements on the website. The shapes don't always mean the boxes you see on the website, but it can also involve the icons. Now, if your design contains, say, a lot of circular elements, in case your focal point in a square border, or use a bold sans serif typeface. Now, if your design is text heavy, try inserting like a circular image, or a quote in between the columns of the text. Now, in this example, the shapes of the text boxes vary, but those with similar characteristics remain the same. And this brings contrast and uniformity to the design, making it pleasant and engaging. Now, this usage of varying shapes also makes it aesthetic, because of the contrast. Now, let's talk about the principle of repetition. Now, the three main principles of repetition are aesthetic, consistency, and usability. Now, aesthetics represents the perception of certain elements in the design based on like what is presented in it. Based on aesthetics, people create thoughts, perceptions, and feelings about a certain design, which further affects their satisfaction with the design itself. In short, aesthetics and design affect people's attitude about a certain product. Now, the ultimate goal of any piece of graphic design is to make an impression, hopefully a lasting impression. Now, if a design achieves this goal, it would be fulfilling its purpose to communicate and assist upon a particular message which lingers and then becomes familiar. Now, consistency is a key principle in design, and it's often kind of violated. Consistency in design means equalizing the elements so that they look the same. Repetition is how you maintain consistency in a design, and it helps users get familiarized with the way information is presented to them. So, for instance, bullet lists, they'll use repetition of, say, circular dots to present information. And the repetition of the dots helps readers to scan and read the list quickly. Now, good design practice seeks to repeat some aspects of the design throughout a piece of simple or even complex work. Now, we use repetition to create a sense of unity and consistency, throughout the design. Repetition will create like a particular style. It creates cohesiveness. It creates emphasis. Maybe a hierarchy structure, and it strengthens the design. Now, it could be said that repetition in a design is a type of brainwashing. The more we see something, the more we familiarize ourselves with it, and thus we remember it. Now, whether we like it or not, repetition is impressionable. It's human nature to find comfort and attraction to familiarity. Now, a good example of this, a use of repetition in design, is in branding. In a good brand, there's going to be a consistent use of a graphic type style or maybe language. Now, this can manifest itself in many forms, such as the use of like maybe a particular color or a color scheme, a consistent use of a typeface or a set of chosen typefaces, shapes, um, or motifs, patterns, alignments, photography style, tone of voice, so on. Usability is going to refer to the ease of use of a certain design. So usability is going to be also a very important principle because it affects the success during design. If the usability is bad, then the design itself can be bad, and the final product can also be doomed, for failure in advance. Now, on a website, you'll often notice the same elements are used time and time again from one page to the next. Now, when you move from one page on Amazon to another, the logo at the top of the page stays the same, as does the search bar, the footer, and various other, components. Now, think about any website you visited. The bottom of the page and probably the top two, has a clickable logo, that kind of takes you back to the home page. The repetition of this element is vital to the user experience. Now, repeating consistent elements includes navigation or footers or, again, typography, graphics, and overall style within a website. It gives the visitor a roadmap and a way to navigate, confidently around that website. Visitors who are comfortable, with the repeated design elements will most likely stay, the course and revisit the website time and time again. Now, the more complex you make your website, the harder it can be to bring repetition into your design without going overboard. So you want to keep it simple, um, and exercise restraint. Whether you only use repetition for colors and fonts or background images and patterns. Remember that not every single element needs to be repeated. And then when using repetition to establish like hierarchy or sort of a rhythm, it's important to organize your information. Organize it well before you start designing. And this will help you to begin to think of, more visually and recall, elements that could be repeated throughout your design. Now, you got your section heading and intro style just the way you want it. So then you use CSS, use technology, so that you're using the exact same style throughout. And then repetition without variation on a website makes it kind of monotone, dull, or maybe even tiresome. But too much repetition will equal boredom, and too much variety is going to equal confusion. So what you want to do is you want to aim so sort of for that perfect amount of each, that sweet spot, that lies somewhere between too much repetition and too much variation. So here, note the repetition of the ribbons, that contain the section headers, as well as the consistent colors and fonts throughout this layout. Now, these slides here, they convey a repetition of a set of colors and the style of text and the shape. And this helps users to identify each slide as part of a bigger whole, or a brand. Now, alignment is another important design principle. It helps ensure a sharp, ordered appearance for ultimately better design by ensuring your various elements of your design have a pleasing connection with each other. For text, this could be center, right, or left aligned, which is probably the most common. But you can also go with like an aligned text to other objects, in your graphics, or maybe some kind of asymmetry. So if something looks Not quite in your design. What you want to do is check your alignment. Now, the two basic kinds of alignment are edge alignment and center alignment. Now, edge alignment naturally positions elements against a margin that matches up with their outer edges. Center alignment places design elements so that they line up with one another on their center axis. Now, there are four types of edge alignment. There's left aligned, where you stick elements to the left of the y axis. There's right aligned, where you stick elements to the right of the y axis. There's top aligned, where elements will be at the top of the x axis. And then there's bottom aligned, where the elements will stick to the bottom of the x axis. And then there's two types of center align. There's horizontally centered, where we place the elements along the central y-axis, and then there's vertically centered align, where we place elements along the center x-axis. So alignment helps us to create like a sense of unity by providing like structure and connected elements in a subtle but powerful way. So media objects are a very common like UI pattern, but with variable width icons, it's easy to kind of end up with like some kind of misalignment. One tip for media object alignment is to center align your icons and then left align all of your text like it is here in this example. Notice that in this example, we're aligning like items with like items. Now, although the fourth item here has no icon, it still remains left aligned with the text above it. Now, in cases where an element's height may vary, but not dramatically or drastically, it might make more sense to say vertically align them across the center. And this can be seen like in the navigation here in the wireframe on the right. Now we have a centered vertical alignment for each of the navigation items in the header, or rather, I'm sorry, horizontally align them. Now look at the group in the sort of in the middle of the three blocks of content. Now when the center, top, or the bottom of the elements align on an invisible horizontal line, you create a vertical alignment. Now, where visual elements are aligned, a composition can appear clear, confident, elegant, formal, and trustworthy. Good alignment is invisible. That is, it doesn't have to be a literal line in your design. Now, in design, one should try to avoid the appearance of having made arbitrary decisions. So when visual elements are, say, out of alignment, it's noticeable and can kind of devalue your piece of work, whatever you're doing, especially if it's done unintentionally. Now, a grid structure refers to a pattern where horizontal and vertical lines cross over each other, creating a series of squares and rectangle forms or blocks. Now, using a grid structure will help you to make your content more organized and design quickly. Think about Bootstrap. You know, you can, also create like this perfect framework, using Bootstrap for positioning text, images, and shapes and other elements. And you don't have to spend a lot of time, in trying to do horizontal or vertical mapping. Now, reading pattern is a scientific study that reveals what direction our eyes move or scan, say, a page or a website. Now, remember, 80% of the visitors only scan websites. They don't love to read out every single word on the page. So you must present the most important information in such a way that automatically kind of comes to the reader's eyes, while they scan your site. Now, an ideal solution could be using like the right reading pattern. There's many types of reading patterns. The F shape and the Z shape are probably the two most used, of all of them. Like watch the image here. You'll kind of see a brief demonstration of how they actually work. So with the Z pattern, you start at the top and you just basically kind of make a Z. So the way that they've designed it is they've designed it to complement a Z pattern on the left. And then on the right, your eyes kind of do a F pattern. So you go across and then you go down and across. So the layout has been designed to complement that. Now, the right alignment in your web design can be crucial for several different reasons. One is the alignment of the element within your website can be part of a responsive design. And this is because when the website is loaded, say from a device with a smaller screen size, such as like maybe a smartphone or a tablet, the layout and the structure will change to something that maybe you've pre-planned. However, this change will relate to the alignment and the positioning of the space between and within the elements. So if your alignment is not, say, spot on, you could find like half of your text missing from the screen, or buttons or forms that are unable to be clicked or filled in. Now, this type of error not only drives potential customers and clients away from your website or your app, but it can also have like negative impact on your website ranking on like search engine result pages. And this is because search engines like Google, they pay attention to like mobile web design performance and they rank the sites accordingly to kind of give the users the best possible experience. Now, we talk about functionality. It's not just, mobile design that can be affected negatively, with poor alignment. In general, your website elements need to align for full functionality. If your website user thinks that they're pressing a button or a link, but it's not properly aligned, then they may simply think that your website is broken. Not only will they leave, but they'll also be less likely to feel positive, say, about your company or your organization. So misaligned text and imagery can also be very off-putting and become difficult to concentrate on. Text that's aligned with all different ways, will certainly be like difficult to read. And the right alignment, can avoid all of these issues and kind of keep your potential customers or clients happy. And then, of course, there's professionalism. So finally, using the right alignment in web design or in mobile apps can be crucial for, say, projecting the right image or professionalism and quality. Now, after all, your product is a visual extension of your company or your organization. And it may, be the only representation, say, of your company or brand online. So as a result, it's important, that this has to reflect the quality and the value of your company or your organization. Now let's look at how alignment is used in text paragraphs. Now in the image, we can see left, center, and right alignment text. Now if we try to read the text, we notice that the left aligned text is a lot easier to read. The center aligned text is not so bad, but it's a bit odd compared to the left aligned. However, the center aligned text is easier to read, if there are like maybe only a few sentences, so we can use like centered alignment, say for maybe headers or slogans. Now, the right aligned text is difficult to read. Now, I'm not implying that all right aligned text is difficult to read. Some languages are written from right to left, so the default, for the language is, the right alignment. And using the left alignment for those particular languages might look weird. So let's examine this a little closely. So center alignment works best when dealing with just a few short lines of text. You should never use it for like full paragraphs because it makes it more difficult to read. The audience has like no straight margin so that their eyes must move to the new position every time they need to start a new line. A trap that designers sometimes fall into is placing every element on the center axis of the page. Now, while this is more organized and provides like a more symmetrical look than placing text, haphazardly, you know, as a rule, if you're using center alignment, make sure it's clear that you're using it intentionally, not just because you're lazy and you're just centering everything. Now notice that even though the text here is on the right side of the page, it's still aligned against a flush left margin. Text aligned against a hard left margin is generally considered the strongest, safest choice and is the most common orientation. It results in a very comfortable, secure, and conservative look. Now, flush or left alignment is a great choice whenever you have, again, large paragraphs of text. The hard edge on the left naturally complements the way that we read English. Now, flush right alignment, isn't used so often, so using it can give text sort of like this unconventional look. Flush right alignment is much less common than, say, the other types. So it's often used to give elements like maybe a unique or offbeat look and feel. Now, with this orientation, text is aligned against a hard right hand margin, with the left side being, a little bit more jagged. Like with center alignment, you should avoid this using like flush right on like large paragraphs since the right ragged kind of left edge is going to make it difficult to read. So with shorter lines of text, it can help give your words like extra weight and importance since requires, say, maybe more effort to read. It's more interesting than centering everything, but overusing it can be frustrating to your reader. Now, justified text, especially on the web, is less readable because the white space between the words often create what they call like rivers of white, which can be distracting. Also, the space between the words, it changes from line to line and it kind of disturbs the rhythm of the text. Now, justification also makes it difficult to kind of keep track of the line that we were reading. Even if we don't notice it, the irregular shape of like the left aligned text provides a visual cue, of reading progress. Now, readability issues gets even worse for readers with like dyslexia. Aligning text on only one side is required to comply with the World Wide Web's consortium or the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, which is called the WCAG. An estimated, say, 10% of the population is dyslexia to some extent. So rivers and shifting spaces between the words, they're also problematic, when using like screen magnifiers. Once again, it's easier to find the right line in a left aligned text, even after scrolling. So alignment makes the difference. So I want you to take a look at this and just kind of look at some of the changes we have here. How we have changed the logo. How we have the navigation. Remember, we said kind of stay away from the centered text, especially if there's a lot of text to read. So here we've left aligned it. Same here. All this centered text causes visual problems. So we've left aligned. We've even left aligned, the headers. And then here, instead of justified, which kind of gives, remember we talked about the varying white space. We're experiencing that here in the left line. So again, we've left aligned. Even like the bullet points, and sometimes we kind of break this a little bit. Sometimes we'll indent the bullet points if we want to emphasize them, but notice how things look a little cleaner. Looking at this just kind of looks like things are haphazard. It's just a little harder on your eyes. Like I said, if something doesn't feel right, it's probably because something with the alignment. Okay, so it does make a difference if you take a look and compare these two. Now, proximity is the fourth principle that states that elements that are associated with each other should be placed closely or grouped together and vice versa. Now, the application of proximity, especially in web design, can lead to a better user experience. An amateur designer might try to utilize the completed real estate, of a design, trying to spread elements evenly throughout. Such a design will make it difficult, say, for the users to determine elements that say are related to each other and those that aren't related to each other, which is going to result in poor user experience. Now, the principle of proximity calls for related items to be grouped visually, creating like less clutter and making for a more organized layout. Now, items that are unrelated to each other should be placed further apart to emphasize their lack of relationship. From images to text and navigation bars to web forms, the proximity principle applies heavily to web design. Now, when you group similar content together, it creates sort of like a seamless relationship between the elements and delivers a better visual experience to the viewer. Now, the first step to implementing or properly implementing the principle of proximity is to understand the importance of white space in design. Now, the lack of white space is a common problem, especially in amateur design. Design is a means of communicating information. And when an amateur kind of attempts to convey a message through design, their natural inclination is to spread out, the context evenly to fill up the space, without giving much thought to the potential of well organized white space. Now, white space can affect the user's behavior as much, if not more, than the actual content of the page. White space kind of guides the user's eyes, in the intended direction, creating that contrast or making a lasting impression. Now, even though, say, this W3 Avenues website contains a considerable amount of content, with, the articles under numerous, categories, like the design blog and so on, and like a series of sidebar ads, it doesn't overwhelm the user visually. The generous room in the header and the appropriate spaced items in the content and the sidebar, contribute to the clean and organized look. W3 Avenue is not doing anything particularly unique with its content, but its design probably contributes to the strong traffic that it gets in the short period of time. So don't be insecure about empty space on your design. Properly using white space is the first step in implementing the principle of proximity and thus making a design more visually appealing. Now, don't use too much margin between elements that are related. Okay, a great tip that comes from one of the UI designers that authored the book Refactoring UI is to start with too much white space. When designing for the web, white space is almost always added last to the design. But the problem with this approach is that the elements are only given the minimum amount of breathing room, to not look, actively bad. To make something actually look good, you usually need more white space. A better approach is to start by giving something way too much white space and then removing it until you're happy with the results. Now, this tip ensures that you're not simply meeting the minimum requirement for white space in a design. There's likely a range of spacing that you'll be comfortable with. It's better to err on the side of too much than not enough. Now, white space, however, is just one part of implementing proximity. A design can have a lot of white space, but if items are not grouped correctly, the white space will have little effect as illustrated in these two business cards. Now, while both cards above contain the same information, the way it's presented is different. The information on the card on the left has been distributed evenly, but the card on the right has the information placed with better structure. The related information points have been kind of grouped together. Now, using white space effectively and grouping related elements are critical to giving your website a clear visual hierarchy. Now, the website's architecture and flow of information are the foundations of effective proximity. Hierarchy is conveyed by the way in which elements are grouped and subgrouped. Now, this hierarchy helps the user understand like where they've been and where they're going. And thus, it kind of helps communicate the purpose of the website. Now, a list is a good example of an element that has the potential to communicate visual hierarchy as demonstrated in this image. Now, just by glancing at the two lists without even kind of examining the content, you'll see that the list on the left has a clear visual hierarchy, showing relationship between the different items. Indented items are subcategories, of the primary item. Now, this hierarchy would not be possible without white space. Um, so the list on the right now, this is just like a random grouping of elements, with no seeming relationship, or hierarchy. So in this lecture, we've covered the four visual design principles that you can apply to redesigning your website or designing it for the first time or evaluating a website. Um, the first one is contrast, which allows us to create an interest on the page and aids in the organization of information. Repetition, which unifies and strengthens like a site or an app by tying together, otherwise separate parts or connecting elements visually through visual lines. Alignment, which ensures every element has some kind of visual connection with another element on the page. And then, of course, proximity, which helps organize information, reduces clutter, and gives the reader a clear structure. So, thank you for watching and happy designing.